Smooth 98.1. Love music, love life. It is a beautiful Tuesday morning. It is 20th day of August 2024. This is the Smooth Breakfast, your perfect start to a Tuesday morning or any morning, if I might actually add. My name is Ayokunmi Kekereako. Time to get into the world of business because this is Business Express. We're going to be talking, like I said earlier on, about NNPCL. Yes, NNPCL is an entity that is all over the news at the moment. And we're going to be looking at them declaring 3 trillion naira in 2023 profit. And, they declared this net profit of 3.2 trillion naira at the close of the financial year, which ended in December 2023. Now, this is an increase of over 700 billion naira. That's about 28% when compared to the 2022 profits of 2.5 trillion naira. Joining me this morning to talk about this and make some sense of all these numbers is Mustapha Alao. He's the head of research at Investment One. Very good morning to you, Mustapha. Great to have you on Business Express this Tuesday morning.
Yes, good morning.
All right. For all our listeners out there, you can join us on the conversation by sharing your thoughts on WhatsApp on 0809 440 981. 0809 440 981. You can also join us on YouTube. We're streaming live at Smooth 981 FM Lagos. All right, Mustapha, let's get into the conversation real quick here. Now, we don't have the audited financials yet, but what do you make of the 2023 financial year results of the NNPCL based on the preliminary figures that you have seen?
Okay. So it's reported that the NNPC posted about 3.3 trillion naira in net profits. So that's about a 29.4% rise from 2022, where it's posted about 2.5 trillion naira net profits. So now, whilst the net profits might look impressive on the surface, when we look at the exchange rate factor, and we consider that the naira in 2023, which is the reporting year, was about 899 naira to a dollar. That's what it's closed at anyway, right?
Okay.
This figure is actually worse than the 2022 financial year figure, when the exchange rate was around 449 naira to a dollar. So in dollar terms, we posted about $5.67 billion in 2022. And then in 2023, which is the one we just reported for, we did 3.6 or $3.7 billion. So in dollar terms, it's worse when we consider the exchange rates. Whilst in naira terms, there was that 29.4% growth rate, right? In dollar terms, it was a 35.4% loss in net profit. So, when you take that into consideration, you now see that, I guess, it's not as impressive as it might have looked on the surface when you just assess the naira figures, right? And also, when you consider the fact that crude oil is sold in USD, is sold in dollars, right? I wish the financial statements could be translated, in that functional currency, in addition to the reporting currency, that we already saw. We already know that some upstream players do it, like Seplat, for example. Seplat, which is an indigenous upstream oil and gas company,
Right.
They report in naira and they report in dollars, which would make sense considering the fact that this is a company or this is a body who deals with commodities that are sold in dollars. So the transactions are in USD, right? In addition to that, another consideration would be to assess the ratios, right? So we don't have the full financials, right? But, the only two line items we've been given so far are the net profit, right, which is about 3.3 trillion naira, and the dividend, right? So the dividend is over 2 trillion. That's what they stated are paying out on dividend. Now, if we look at these two line items, you're suggesting a payout ratio, a very high payout ratio, probably about 80% is going to dividend, because when you have net profits, right, that's the earnings that you have after you've removed taxes and all of that. You either decide to reinvest it into your business or you give it out as dividend to your shareholders. Those are the two options.
Okay.
Now, if you are giving out 80% of your earnings as dividend to shareholders, it means you are leaving about 20% to reinvest only. Now the question arises: doesn't NNPC have, infrastructure, turnaround activity that they want to do, that they want to procure and that they want to facilitate, that are out over 2 trillion of the 3.3 trillion in dividends, right? But things start to make a little bit more sense when you consider that the president said, oh, they should use that dividend money to pay the subsidy, that they're supposed to receive. So, I mean, we're looking forward to the full financials, and we'll probably get a bit more color as to the standing of the NNPC.
All right. Now we know that the NNPCL is not a publicly traded company, but is it normal to issue a press release about earnings without the accompanying audited financial statements? And also, do you have any other lingering questions about the NNPCL's performance that you want answered when these statements are actually finally released?
Well, I mean, okay, so firstly, in terms of the NNPC, issuing press release about its earnings, yeah, I mean, you would see that some companies, publicly listed, they would, release, a preliminary circular, or just saying that, we did this in revenue, the key line items, right? We did this in revenue. These are our ratios. This is our profit after tax, right? That's the net profit, so this is our standing. And then very, very shortly after, you now see the full statement. So, I mean, it's not anything that's necessarily out of line. It's completely fine
Right.
for them to do that. As long as it's not going to be a contradictory set of figures that we're now seeing in the AFS,
Aha.
that's the
Very, very
financial.
important there.
So, with regards to the second thing you asked about, what else am I looking for to being answered in the financial statements when they are released? I'm looking forward to seeing the balance sheet. Like I said, we only have two line items that we know for sure now. We know the net profits, which they said is 3.3 trillion. We know the dividend, which they said is over 2 trillion that they're going to pay.
Are you there, Mustapha? Hello, Mustapha, are you there? Hmm. I hope the gremlins are not getting into our connection with Mustafa this morning, because I mean, he was explaining some very important things there, and I hope to get him back on board in a couple of minutes so we can continue the conversation concerning the NNPCL, as they've announced that they earned 3 trillion naira in 2023. Profit. My guest is Mustapha Alao, the head of research at Investment One. Seems like he's having some technical issues at the moment, but I'm looking to get him back on board as soon as possible so we can finish up on this conversation. A lot more to actually talk about, this morning concerning this particular issue. I mean, the NNPCL Chief Financial Officer, Umar Jia, made it a point at the press conference to actually clarify that no subsidy has been paid to any oil marketers, but he did confirm a difference between the landing cost of imported fuel and what is sold to, the general public out there. So it's going to be interesting to hear Mustafa's thoughts on this particular issue as soon as we get him back on board. And it seems like he's back with us on Business Express. Mustafa, can you hear me?
Oh, sorry about that.
Yeah, I thought as much that the gremlins got into your connection there. So
Yeah.
we lost you on the show briefly. But welcome back, welcome back. So I was just saying that the NNPCL Chief Financial Officer Umar Ajia made it a point at the press conference to clarify that no subsidy has been paid to any oil marketers, but he did confirm a difference between the landing cost of imported fuel and what is sold to you, to me, to everyone who is out there. So what difference does it make who the subsidy is paid to as long as it exists?
At the end of the day, when the subsidy is there, right, it drills more holes into the financials or into the finances of our country, right? You're supposed to
Mhm.
be supplying royalties, for example, based on Section 64. seat of the PIA, right? And you have considering the downstream space subsidies that you need to fulfill, especially when we look at the fact that the landing costs, there's a difference between that and the costs that we incur at the pumps. So I mean, obviously somebody's incurring that, and you can't write it off because it's definitely going to go into our balance sheet. And that's why I said earlier that I'm looking forward to seeing our balance sheet, right? Because that will give more color to all of these, But obviously, it's the federal government that is supposed to incur it. The NNPC would, pay those subsidies ahead, which will now make them creditors, if you will, to the federal government. So the federal government is indebted to them, and that's part of why we are seeing the federal government approving for those dividends to be used.
Okay.
That's the interim dividends to be used to offset some of the debt that federal government is owing them. So I mean, in the statements, it's usually referred to as under recovery. So I mean, yeah, for the subsidy, yeah, it's still the federal government is incurring those. The NNPC might help to sort that out in the near term, but it still puts the federal government indebted to the NNPC. So I mean, the subsidy, that is supposed to be paid to oil marketers, that's not something we can write off. It still exists, and we still have to incur that. So that goes into our balance sheet as liabilities, as
Mm.
payables.
All right, all right. Let me take a quick message from Tyre, who says, despite covering the basic and establishing fundamentals, this financial statement requires clarity because I feel like financial reporting and business operations are way off the mark. Internal control measures need more working and not be compromised. Hashtag corporate governance. Thank you for your message, Tyre. Back to you, Mustapha. Now, still on this subsidy matter, the NNPCL CFO has confirmed that 7.8 trillion naira, or about $4.9 billion, is owed by the federal government of Nigeria to the NNPCL for fuel subsidies. What exactly are the implications of this?
So implications are that if the liabilities of the NMDC are that high, then it raises concern about the liquidity and solvency issues. Like I mentioned, I did talk about how PwC, for example, they did raise this kind of issue in the past. So it's not something that's new, and which is quite concerning actually. I mean, here's the thing. See, the NNPC, they have like what they call these T60-day transactions, right? Which is on its balance sheet, and it reads as payables to international traders for
Okay.
crude oil swap deals. So essentially, the NNPC is owing, some, international traders, you know, and they're supposed to pay something in 60 days. And
Mm.
if that payment is not made within the 60-day period, then the debt starts to incur some interest on it. Uh, in terms in London, they apply this interbank offered rates LIBOR, which is between 1.5 to 2%. And in addition to that, they add a country risk premium, say it's about 6%, considering the risk profile of Nigeria. So that is, you're looking at 8%, 8%, 7 to 8%. So that is also another interest that you're incurring on top of that initial amount that you're owing. So when you have you know this kind of high amount, like you mentioned 7.8 trillion, right?
Mm.
And then you're having this kind of interest that is continuously being accumulated on top of that. You have to either pay through cash or you pay through equity in feedstock. And when you don't do that
Right.
on time, then you drill more holes into the finances of your country, right? You drill more holes into the finances of your country, and that doesn't only affect NNPCL, but the country as a whole, right? The country as a whole, because when you have the subsidy
Mm.
bill, which we do not, officially state, in our budgets, then you start to see inflated figure or more than necessary figures when it comes to supplementary budgeting, for example, because why they need to sort that out. You
Okay.
know, we see potential of us still going through ways and means that is CBN financing, and yeah, fiscally, it just doesn't put us in a good position.
Mm. Fiscally doesn't put us in a good position. And hey, all we want is for everything to go in the way they're actually supposed to. We can talk about this all day and probably even till tomorrow, but we need to call it a morning on Business Express right now. Thank you so much, Mustapha Alao, for joining me. He's the head of research at Investment One. It's been a pleasure having you on the show this morning.
Thank you for having me.
All right. Thank you to all our listeners for being a part of Business Express. As always, the Smooth Breakfast will continue more great music as we get to the 7:30 hour, where we'll get into the headlines on Freshly Pressed. Don't go anywhere.